Welcome to the Social Mission Revolution.
Each week we explore some of the greatest undertold stories of businesses and everyday people who are making their ultimate impact on the world through social mission. This is Social Mission Revolution,
And this is your host, Andrea Putting. Welcome to the Social Mission Revolution. And today my guest is Steve Pipe. He is a retired accountant with a big mission in life. He has, I should have those figures in front of me, over 6 million impacts that you've made in the world. Is that correct?
Yeah, my target is actually 100 million, but we're at 6 million directly and 22 million as a community.
Fantastic. So this is something that I wanted to explore a little bit on Social Mission Revolution, on how do we make an impact in the world. And some of the things that Steve talks about, that we will talk about today, are really important for us to think about when we do have our own social mission. So welcome, Steve.
Hi, Andrea. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really, really excited. It's early morning here in the UK on a wet day, so it's brilliant to have some sunshine.
That's good. So, Steve, I start with the question that I ask everyone this one question. If there was just one thing for you to fight for, what would it be?
A better future for our children, grandchildren, everyone that comes after that. Now, obviously, creating that better future involves lots of things, lots of actions, the sort of stuff that they talk about the COP26, the sort of stuff that we're all aware of, the UN global goals and so on. But, you know, it's about creating, leaving and living a better legacy so that we leave the world in a better state than we came into it, than we found it. I think that's each of our responsibilities, and that is absolutely a mission worth living for, fighting for.
It is, and I always talk about it's about leaving a legacy worth living.
Yeah. I think there are three dimensions to legacy, and everybody thinks about leaving a legacy as if it's something that happens after you've gone. But it happens, it continues after you've gone. That's the leaving bit. But we can live a legacy. We have to do the things now and start to experience the benefits ourselves and the joy that comes because we're helping others now by living a legacy as well as leaving a legacy. And actually, in Paul Dunn's words, leveraging our legacy so that, you know, our enthusiasm, and that's exactly what you're doing, I think, through the podcast and your work. You know, it's about leveraging great ideas, spreading them out more widely so that more people get it, more people want to take part, more people want to do stuff that creates a better future for our children and grandchildren. That's leveraging a legacy as well as living it and leaving it.
Absolutely. And I also like to throw in an extra avenue on there. In that the legacy we leave, we want it to be one that our children, our grandchildren, whoever comes in contact with wants to live that legacy as well. There's no point leaving a legacy that they're not interested in.
Oh, that's a really, really important point, isn't it? So it's got to stack up across the generations. It's got to, and that means I think that it has to be deeply and profoundly connecting with people and resonant with people around stuff that really matters. And ultimately, whether you've got the latest iPad or the biggest car or, you know, the smartest house, that doesn't matter. You know, what ultimately matters, and COVID, if nothing else, has shown us what matters is, you know, it is love and connection and a sense of safety and a sense of belonging and a sense of contributing and making an impact and friendship and all those are the things that will always matter. And if our legacy is built around those, then it will be enduring and it will appeal to every future generation. Whereas if our legacy is built around more transitory stuff, you know, like my legacy is to be a social influencer. Well, you know, yeah, kind of, so what? In 5 years' time, in 5 weeks' time, maybe even in 5 hours' time, it won't matter.
Yes.
And it certainly won't in 5 centuries. Whereas, you know, what I would love to be doing are things which are going to still be remembered, and not so much remembered because that doesn't matter, but are still making a positive difference in 5 centuries' time.
Yes, absolutely. So, Steve, I'd love you to share with us about what your social mission is in the world. What is it that's really driving you at the moment?
I guess I've never really thought of it as a social mission, but of course that's that's the way in which you describe these things, and I think it's brilliant. My background is that I'm a 60-year-old retired accountant, as you mentioned. I built from scratch, not even from a spare bedroom, but from a shared bedroom. We had a 2-bedroom house, our bedroom, and the bedroom for Laura, our then 6-month-old baby. And working in the baby's bedroom, I started a business which grew to 40 people. We didn't all stay in the children's bedroom. Let me make that clear. But
I hope not.
Absolutely, we grew to 40. She's now a 30-year-old GP, by the way. So there was a long time ago that started. But my background has always been in business, both as an accountant and then setting up my own, initially an accounting business, but that then became a consulting advisory business. Along the way, I wrote lots and lots of books. For the benefit of those watching this, you can see some of them there. Not that they matter in the slightest, but we won some awards and stuff along the way too. I've always been fascinated by what makes business successful and how to help business people make better decisions. I think that's the role of an accountant, to help use data and analysis and evaluation so that businesses make better decisions over their future, their sales, their profits, their costs, and so on. And so I've researched those sorts of things, and I've been really in that area for an entire professional career. But really what I think I'd missed until the last 10 years or so of that professional career is the most important bits. And essentially it's purpose, it's mission in your language. It's the thing that frustrates me is the number of lovely people I have met in business who are lovely people at home, but somehow when they leave, they cross the threshold, they leave home and they go to work. I can point to my front door over there. That's, when they leave home, those values seem to get left behind. The kindness, the caring, the consideration that they live as values at home just don't show up at work, in their businesses, and they're not structured that way. And it's not, there are random acts of kindness maybe, but random acts of kindness are beautiful, but how much better would the world be if there was systematic acts of kindness built into every business? And so really my focus and my discoveries over the last 10 years or so have been how we can take this idea of systematic acts of kindness, how we can take this idea of the values that we live at home. If they're truly values, they show up everywhere. If they're not actually values, they don't. We make a choice over when we use them or not. But if they're actually values, they show up everywhere. And if kindness and caring and generosity and leaving a legacy and want to make things better for future generations and making the world a better place, after we've been here than it was before we got here, if those things really are our values, if they go to our core of this kind of legacy that our future generations will still want to be part of and be proud of, then they have to show up in our businesses. And that's really been my starting point. How can we get our values to show up in our businesses? And there are all sorts of things that, of course, we probably need to do. The challenge always, and if I've learned one thing over a career in business, is that if we start with the difficult stuff, it's usually so difficult that we fail. And when we fail, we give up. And so the key is always to start with the easy stuff. Why start with the difficult? Why start running a marathon before you've even done any training? You won't succeed, and you'll think running's awful and you'll stop. Whereas if you just run a 1K, all of us can probably do that at first, and then you build progressively. You do the easy stuff first and you build towards the harder stuff. And it's exactly the same, I think, in business. So I was looking for the easiest way we could start in our businesses to make our values show up. And what I think that is really an incredibly simple idea. And I set it out in the book, Our Time to Rise, which anybody who's watching or listening to this is very welcome to have a copy of it for free. I'm on a mission to give away 1 million copies of the book. You can get it on Amazon for $45. For goodness sake, don't pay Amazon a single penny for it. I'll just give it to you for free in digital form. Of course, therefore, there's no trees cut down. But the essence of that book, and it's a step-by-step guide for how we can turn our businesses into a force for good, the easiest things we can do, the place where we need to start. The essence of that book is really very simple. It's 2 things. Just imagine if every time something good happened in your business, something good happened in the world. So, for example, just imagine if every time you got a new customer, a tree was planted, or every time you made a sale, a child was fed, or every time someone pays you on time for an invoice, a homeless person gets a roof over their head, or whatever acts of kindness you want to unlock, you want to link to the good things in your business. Just imagine if a tiny fraction of the success that we have in business flows out and creates a better world systematically, so that if our values are kindness and compassion and consideration and contribution and impact and leaving the world a better place than when we found it and so on, if those are our values, we can let them randomly show up through random acts of kindness, but it would be so much better if we let them systematically show up by building them into our systems. And that's an incredibly easy thing to do. For example, every time we win a new customer, if we chose to plant a tree, you can plant a tree from 22 US cents. Yeah. So, the lifetime value of most customers in most businesses is thousands of dollars. 22 cents. If 22 cents is too much, you can feed a child for 1 cent. You can provide access to grain, which when planted grows into food, a day's worth of food, 1 cent. Or you can provide access to a day's worth of water, 1 cent US, and so on and so forth. So there's no reason whatsoever why we can't do this. But there's every reason why we should. And I think the two main reasons why we should are, firstly, we know in our heart that it would be wonderful, wouldn't it, if we knew that every time our business moved forward, so did the world. And the problems of the world were being tackled, global climate change and poverty and inequality and injustice and hunger and lack of access to education. If we linked our success to tackling those problems in this tiny systematic way, it would start to, and if every business did this, just imagine if millions of businesses were doing this. I've been able to, by doing this, as you mentioned at the beginning, be able to provide 6 million days of help through my business. And I'm sitting here now retired, but working from home and still making a difference every single day in this kind of way. So every day, for example, I do 17 things, 17 acts of kindness, which there's a bit of software that makes that really easy for me from B1G1. I plant 3 trees, I feed a homeless person and 13 other things, 17 for a reason, because there are 17 UN global goals. And I choose to do that every single day, because for me, another day of life, another day of the happiness that is my life and the love that I experience in my life and the warmth and safety in my life, what better can I do than to say thank you for that, than to unlock some kindness elsewhere in the world by planting trees and feeding children and so on. And I do that every single day. And I do that at 8 a.m. every single morning. And I have it diarized. It's actually on my list. You won't be able to see it. Most of you, there it is on my list, giving. It's already been marked off as having been done. I'm an old school piece of paper person. So it's the right thing to do emotionally, but it's also the right thing to do financially. If I take off my hat as a human being and put on my hat as a human calculator, as an accountant, and my background is, before accountancy, is economics. If my whole, as I said before, my whole professional career had been around helping businesses make rational decisions to improve things for them as businesses. And I think there's a really, really interesting example that brilliantly illustrates this point. So with your permission, Andrea, I'll just go through that and people can answer the question themselves. Just imagine, we're now in the UK here, we no longer have lockdowns, we're able to go out shopping and so on, and I'm tentatively doing those things. Imagine that you're allowed to go out as well, wherever in the world you are, and you really fancy a cup of coffee. You're on a high street in town, and right in front of you are 2 coffee shops, seemingly identical. They're obviously equally convenient because they're right in front of you. Turns out they sell the same coffee beans. They make it in the same way, using the same machines, the same milk, equally nice baristas. They charge exactly the same price. There is literally no difference, as far as you can tell, between the coffee shop on the left and the coffee shop on the right, with one exception. Coffee shop on the left doesn't do what I'm about to explain. The coffee shop on the right does. The coffee shop on the right, when you go in there and buy your cup of coffee, it unlocks a day's worth of access to clean water for a child in Africa. And so because they get that water, not only do they not have to speak, usually we visited Kenya in 2019, and usually there it's the youngest daughter in the family that has the job of bringing water back from wherever the water source is to the home. And the water is often 45 minutes, an hour away, depending on whether it's rained recently and how close the water source is. It's always downhill, of course, with the empty bucket, because water flows downhill. It's back uphill with the full bucket in the searing heat. It's something you have to do that several times a day. And that takes up so much time often that the youngest daughter in the family literally does not have time to go to school. So not only does not having water at home or in the village prevent her going to school, but they drink this stuff, which is technically water, but I can promise you the stuff we brought back when we were in Kenya looked like the tea in my cup there. It is brown sludge, and they have to drink this. So it also makes them ill. Now let's end that. Just because we've gone in and bought a coffee from the coffee shop on the right, it unlocks a day's worth of water in the village, so that firstly they get clean water. They don't have to go and walk for it. The young girl doesn't have to miss school. She goes to school. It completely changes her life. It's the same cost. It's $3. The coffee shop on the right, the coffee shop on the left. The one on the left doesn't have a social mission, if you like. Its values probably run by nice people, but they just don't do this kind of thing. The coffee shop on the right, run by equally nice people, but and this is the difference. They actually do something. They take an action. They don't talk. They don't, in Greta's terms, go the blah, blah, blah. You know, they don't just say stuff like many of our leaders do. They actually do stuff. So you're now standing outside these two coffee shops, the one on the left, not doing this, and the one on the right. It's the same price coffee. Which coffee shop would you go into? Now, people can answer that question themselves, but let me tell you what happened. And I do this many, many times. I did it twice with two different groups yesterday. A few weeks ago, I did this at my first live speaking engagement for 2 years. It was a group of 140 accountants just outside Stratford-upon-Avon here in England. And at this point, I got them to stand up and say, okay, there's the coffee shop on the left or the coffee shop on the right. Go to the right or the left of the room and join the queue for the coffee shop you're going into. It's 140 of them. 139 went to the coffee shop on the right. And one person went to the coffee shop on the left. And I said to him, well, out of interest, and obviously it's your decision, your prerogative, why are you over there? He said, look at the queue on that side. There was 139 people queuing up for the coffee shop on the right. Now, it isn't going to be 139 out of 140. Let's get real about it. There are always going to be people that go to the coffee shop on the left. They don't know, they don't understand, they don't care about the social mission bit. But this is the point. Will doing this tip the scales? Will doing this bring more nice customers who care about the future of the planet and want to create a legacy just by buying a cup of coffee to the coffee shop on the right? You bet. And it's not just the 140 people in this room, and it's not just whatever answer everybody gave to that when I used the example in this conversation. There is a massive evidence that businesses that do good, businesses that have purpose at their core in a believable, credible way. It's not just words, it has to be backed up by real action and proof of that. That's the key. But those kind of businesses do better. They win more customers. They win nicer customers. Because imagine the people that go to the coffee shop on the left, some of them are miserable gits who are of the opinion that helping people is not what they want to do. Now, some of them go there because it's more convenient, it's easier, they didn't understand. I get that. Some of them go there because the queue's too big at the other side. But the point is that on average, you get nicer customers when your kindness shows up. You get nicer customers. Which of those two coffee shops are people going to talk about? They're not going to talk about the coffee shop on the left. There's nothing to say. The coffee shop on the right has got a reason. You never guess what? Went into this coffee shop and it provided clean water. We're actually changing the lives of children. You never guess what? Actually, there's a sign up that shows they've given 6 million days of clean water or whatever the figure is. And you go on their website and you can see live, real-time data that proves these aren't just empty words. This is real. This is what they're actually doing. So if I wear my commercial hat as a human calculator, not as a human being, my old hat as an accountant, which of these two business models, the business on the left that can't be bothered or doesn't get round to doing this, and the business on the right that has got round to doing this, that's built kindness into its business model, which business model would I be advising them purely based on the facts, purely based on the data, make a rational decision to do that? It's the coffee shop on the right.
Absolutely.
And if you put your hat back on as a human being, which of these two is the right thing to do? It's the coffee shop on the right. There is absolutely no reason apart from laziness, not being nice, not caring, to be the coffee shop on the left. And crucially, I think the coffee shop on the left gets left behind and the coffee shop on the right succeeds because it's doing the right thing. That's the simple idea. If business took that idea and worked out their way of being like the coffee shop on the right. And it's really, really simple. It's just make this connection, make a decision. The coffee shop have decided when we sell a cup of coffee, we're going to give access to a day's worth of water. That's their decision. But what equivalent decision could we build into our systems? Maybe when we win a customer, or when we make a sale, or when we get paid, or when we get a testimonial, get a referral, someone follows us on social media, or when we get a listener on our podcast or whatever. That could be the trigger. We're in complete control of what the trigger is, and then we're in complete control of what act of kindness that unlocks in the world. Is it planting trees? Is it feeding people? Is it providing education? Given that you can unlock these acts of kindness from 1 US cent, there's literally nothing in the way. Now, we go back to my coffee shop example, the water is 1 US cent. I then always ask the same group of people, whilst they're standing in the queue, 139 versus 1 the other week in Stratford upon Avon, I say, okay, now imagine that the coffee shop on the right is 1 cent more expensive, because in that way it actually fully covers the cost of the water. So actually providing the water costs the coffee shop on the right nothing, because it's put the price up by 1 cent. Would you switch or would you stay? So stay where you are if you would stay, even though it's 1 cent more expensive, or move to the other side if you would switch. Nobody switches. So this doesn't even have to cost a single penny, because nobody switches. People, the evidence from Deloitte earlier this year, by the way, is that people will pay up to 39.5% more for products and services where they believe that the purpose that the business talks about is real. So you've got to prove that it's real, other than not just blah, blah, blah in Greta's terms, but where you can prove it's real. Deloitte found a 39.5% price premium, and that when you come to sell your business, it'll be worth 4 times as much. So if I go back to where I'm at, it's absolutely amazing statistic. Why would anybody who is either a rational human being and operates on the facts, or an emotional human being and operates as a human being, why would any human being not do this? It's laziness, it's carelessness, it's lack of care. It's just not getting around to it. So my mission, Andrea, is to act as a wake-up call, to be blunt and brutal about this and tell people it makes complete sense, rationally, financially, emotionally. Why on earth aren't you doing it?
Yeah. So
what my mission was, I gave it to you both, all guns blazing.
Absolutely. So what we're talking about here is one particular way that makes it really simple for people. And I've had a few people on my podcast who we've talked about B1G1. So can you just give us a little bit of insight into how B1G1 works? Now, one of the things I really want to highlight is this importance of the proof of the impact that you're making, because I don't think many of us think about that fact.
I think you're absolutely right. So just to make things completely clear, I've been a member of the B1G1 community for 12 years. I do not run B1G1. I use their tools. I pay them for the privilege of using their tools, in the same way that I pay Zoom to use their tools and Dropbox to use their tools, because they are the best tools that allow me to do what I want to do in my life, and actually the best way I've ever seen of doing the sort of stuff we're talking about here. So this is me as a user answering your question, not me as a representative of the B1G1 charity. But as a user, I think what they do is genius. And I think of it this way. B1G1 is essentially like Amazon for kindness. And let me explain what I mean by that. By the way, it has nothing whatsoever to do with Amazon. But if today I wanted to buy a highlighter pen, for example, I might open up Amazon, I might type in highlighter pen in the search engine, find the one I want, add it to my shopping basket, check out and pay, and a few days later, the highlighter pen is delivered. Imagine being able to do that, but not for highlighter pens, but for all of those acts of kindness that I talked about before, planting trees, feeding a child, providing access to education, putting a roof over a homeless person's head and so on. Imagine being able to search for them and being able to put them in a shopping basket and check out and pay. And imagine knowing that when you did that, 100% of the money that you pay goes directly and in a ring-fenced way specifically to fund the activity you've chosen. If I give $2 to buy a highlighter pen, Amazon doesn't decide how much of that $2 to give to someone else. It delivers the $2 highlighter pen. And in exactly the same way, what I call Amazon for Kindness, which is B1G1, has this big online shop for acts of kindness, so that we can do what I've just talked about, linking making sales and getting customers and so on with acts of kindness. And we can do that. We can automate that whole process through B1G1. And so I absolutely love it. And there's a number of other things I love about it. I love the fact, I mean, I think it's genius that they've created this Amazon for Kindness because no one else has done that. I love the fact they essentially allow us to crowdfund kindness. And what I mean by that is, so for example, drilling a well to get water in that Kenyan village does not cost 1 cent, and it costs hundreds of dollars. Of course it does. But what they do is they allow us to, so they say, okay, once we put the well in for, let's say it's $100, I don't know how much it costs, but let's say it's $100. That well is going to deliver lots of water for many years to many people. So if we divide the number of days water it's going to be, it's going to yield water, and divide the cost by the number of days and the number of people, we work out the per person per day funding costs of accessing that water, 1 cent. Yep. So we are essentially crowdfunding it with other people to fund that water. Our money is ring-fenced to specifically fund that outcome. There's no other way that I know of being able to fund outcomes in the world of giving. If I gave $5 to almost any other charity you care to mention, I have literally no idea what happens to that $5. Yeah. Yes, if I really want to, I can get the charities' accounts and I can read that on average they give, 70% of the money they get goes to, projects on the ground, and the other 30% is used for bank charges and head office costs and technology and websites and all that stuff. I can work out it's 70%, maybe $3.50. But even if I work that out, I have no idea what that $3.50 is used for. But with B1G1's Amazon for Kindness, if I give $5, 100% of my $5 flows to the charity, and 100% of that flows to the charity on the ground in India or Kenya or America or Australia or New Zealand, wherever it is. And it's ring-fence funding that can only be used for the project I chose to fund.
Yes.
And so I think there's genius in that, which means we can now measure the impact that we create. When I give $5 to almost any other charity, the only thing I can measure is how much money I've given. And that's not very emotionally connected. I give them $5, well, kind of, so what? But for $5, you can give a child access to clean water for a year, which means she can get to school for a year, which means her entire life changes. Now, which is the better story? If the coffee shop had said, when you come in and buy your cup of coffee from us, we give 1 cent to charity, everyone would have gone, well, so what? The better way of telling the story is, when you come in and buy your cup of coffee from us, we give access to clean water. Now, it happens to cost a cent, but they don't mention the cent cost. They talk about the impact, because the impact is what resonates with us. It's what connects with us. It's what hits us in the heart and goes, wow, that's fantastic. So the B1G and Amazon for Kindness tools are the only tools I know that allow us to do that. But there is obviously a big question in here, which is, okay, if 100% of my $5 flows through, and they don't even deduct anything for the bank charges, how's that possible? And I think this is the other bit of genius about B1G, and which is why I've loved it for such a long time, that there are two legal entities. There is a B1G1 charity and a B1G1 social enterprise. When I gave my $5, 100% of my $5 goes to the B1G1 charity, and they pass 100% of it through to the charities on the ground in India and Africa and so on that are actually doing the work. B1G1 is essentially a conduit, but it doesn't deduct anything. If you give to Just Giving and so on, they take money out or they add it in, but there's none of that here. But obviously those costs are real. B1G1 have got to create the technology, they've got to due diligence. The charities have got to make sure the money does really flow through. They've got to pay the bank charges. So how are those costs picked up? And that's where the genius comes in, because it's the social enterprise that picks up all the costs so that the charity doesn't have to suffer them. Brilliant. Okay, wonderful. But final question that all begs is, well, where does the social enterprise get its money in order to pick up those costs? And the social enterprise is a membership organization. Businesses like mine pay $1 a day, $2 a day, depending on how large we are. In the same way that I pay, $1 a day or so to Zoom, and I pay $1 a day or so to Dropbox and all the other software providers that I choose to use their services because they make my life easier and better. We're recording this on Zoom. You probably have to pay to use Zoom, because it's the best way of us having a conversation, you on the other side of the world to me, and then making this available to other people. B1G1 is exactly the same. I love the fact that I've got this crystal clarity. My contributions towards the cost of making all this happen is $1 a day or $2 a day, and I can stop at any time. So I'm not tied in or locked in. And then as and when I choose to give, it 100% flows through, and that's all due diligence and control. Now, I've also worked with charities on the receiving end. The charity in Cambodia that helps prevent young girls getting sucked into sex trafficking, typically across the border into Thailand, and they prey on vulnerable young girls. And this charity works on identifying the vulnerable and keeping them in school rather than and making it possible for them to stay in school, which means that they're pet. Because often what happens in Thailand, in Cambodia, believe it or not, is that the parents see the daughters going across the border to Bangkok to get involved in the industry as the best way forward, and that's because because education just seems unattainable. But if we can keep them in education, they don't go there. Anyway, my point is that I've worked with as an advisor to that particular charity, which is on the receiving end of the funds flowing through. And I know for a fact they do indeed flow through. I've seen the process that the B1G1 charity uses to due diligence the worthy causes. They call them worthy causes, but they're charities. To due diligence them on the ground, to audit, to make sure that the funds are ring fenced and are only used for the purposes that they're intended for. And 80% of the charities that ask to go on this Amazon for Kindness platform are not accepted. That's not because they're not necessarily doing good work, but there's incredibly stringent criteria for being included. Obviously they've got to be able to identify in a verifiable way the cost of a project. Because if you can't identify the cost, we can't fund it directly. We can't say it's going to cost 1 cent a day or 5 cents a day or whatever. Yeah. So they need to have, robust accounting and primarily speaking English and a whole load of other, a whole load of other hurdles to clear, which 80% of charities don't clear, by the way. So I'm an accountant. My entire life has been based around checking stuff out. That's what accountants do, really. And I've checked this out. I'm absolutely 100% comfortable and confident that it does exactly what it says on the tin, which is why I've been paying my $2 a day for 12 years and why I've been using those tools to unlock 6 million days of kindness. My goal is to create a community of impact-driven businesses that collectively will unlock 100 million days. We are currently at 22.5, 23 million days. The whole thing is measured in real time, because that's the other genius of B1G, and it allows us to measure this stuff in real time, as opposed to measuring how much money we've given, which is wonderful. But it's, look at me, I've given $1,000. Sounds boastful, but being able to say to a customer, together this year we've provided 1,000 days of help to children in need. That doesn't sound boastful. That's inclusive. That's humbling. That's beautiful. That's joyful.
And that makes them feel good as well.
And it makes them feel great. It makes them feel great too, because that's my book, Our Time to Rise, actually sets out a 4-step process for doing this stuff. And as I said before, please don't buy this on Amazon. Just I'll give you the links so that Andrea can put the link around this recording. But you'll download it for free with my compliments, and please take a look, read it, and then do something with what you read, because otherwise, all these great intentions we have, yes, we want to make the world a better place. It will only become a better place if each and every single one of us does something. I am categorically not an activist. I will never stand out on a street corner shouting at other people, waving a placard saying, you aren't doing X, Y, Z. You aren't, tackling climate change. I mean, I agree they aren't tackling climate change, but I believe it's our responsibility first and foremost not to blame other people, not to rely on other people, not to shout at other people with placards or block them going up motorways or whatever. I believe it's our responsibility to do what we can do, to take the action we can take. So, for example, I've sold my car. We used to have 2 cars. One of them was a big petrol guzzler, mine. I've sold it. We now have 1 tiny Mini in the family. I use it as little as possible. I walk and cycle wherever I possibly can, as opposed to me standing around waving a placard telling other people to reduce their carbon emissions. I've just sold my car. That's the difference between actionism and activism. It's about taking personal responsibility. It's about, in Gandhi's words, being the change we want to see and not relying on others to do it. And each and every one of us, I think, has that responsibility, but also that opportunity. We can be the change we want to see in our businesses by using the approach we've been talking about, Andrea, and in our lives by doing everything else that we can to lead the way, to lead by example, to be the change we want to see.
Yes. So B1G1, I totally completely respect the work that they're doing. It makes it easy for any business to be involved in social mission. And there is a wide range of different ways of being involved in social mission, for sure, because, you know, I've done all these podcasts on social mission, so I know the various ways.
Yeah.
However, not everyone has the time, the energy, or they're not necessarily in the position to undertake some of these bigger projects. But this is something that even the smallest, even the busiest business can embrace. And one of the things I love when I've looked at the B1G1 site, if I go on there and I think of the most obscure business and try and find a project that relates to it, and I never fail. There is always something that will be very specific to what your business is about or what your passion is about.
You are absolutely right. In fact, my offer to anyone listening or watching is, if you want a one-to-one meeting with me, which will work out how to make this work for you in less than an hour, we can get this up and running so it's embedded in your business, so the systematic acts of kindness happen in the same sort of way they do to the coffee shop, but in a way that is specific to your particular business. I'm completely confident that, and I'll help you for free. I'm now retired, so all I'm doing is giving away my 3 days a week that I work unpaid, give away my time, energy, and intellectual property to get this message out there. So I will help any of you make this happen. And if you remember, I go back to the beginning. I'm not interested in the difficult stuff. We all have to tackle the difficult stuff down the line, for sure. But the place to start is with the easy stuff. And as you rightly say, Andrea, this is the easiest possible way of putting social mission into our business. It's the quickest possible way. In less than an hour, we can crack this together. So if anybody wants to take me up on that offer, there'll be my contact details, I guess, around this this recording.
Okay. And I think we're running out of time, Steve. You've given us so much value in what you've been sharing with us. So if you want to, can you read off any of your links that you can give us? Where's the best place for us to find some information?
Well, the easiest way to actually get a specific response to a specific inquiry or need is just to email me, and my email address is steve@stevepipe.com. So that's fairly straightforward. The other web addresses are a bit longer. What I intend to do, if that's okay with you, is give you those links and you can write them up somewhere around this. But yeah, if anybody wants to reach out, really happy. I'm based in the UK, but we can find a time that works wherever you are in the world. We can use Zoom to make that happen. Steve@stevepipe.com.
Thank you, Steve. I really appreciate your time, and I'm sure that a lot of people get a lot of value out of listening to this podcast.
Thank you so much, Andrea.
And that's all we have time for today on the Social Mission Revolution, and we'll be back next time with another Social Mission Revolutionist. This has been the Social Mission Revolution with Andrea Putting. Join me again next week when we'll speak to another Social Mission Revolutionist who will inspire you on your journey to making your ultimate impact on the world.